an institute that will spread the Jewish idea. When we use the concept of the Jewish idea, we use it because there is a Jewish idea. There is an authentic one, as opposed to the tragic corruption or corruptions in various ways of the authentic Jewish idea. The Ramchal in Mesilat Yesharim, which by the way is one of the truly great Sfarim, Path of the Just, Mesilat Yesharim, says the following thing. Ki hine choshech halayla shnei minei ta'uyot efshar lo she'yigrom le'ein ha'adam. Darkness at night can cause two kinds of errors. Can cause two kinds of mistakes. O yichased ha'ayin ad shelo yir'eh mashe lefanav klal. Either darkness is so dark that a person does not see anything in front of him. O sheyateh oto, or it can fool him in such a way. Ad she yir'eh lo amud ki'ilu hu adam, v'adam ki'ilu hu amud. He can see something, and he thinks it's a man, and really it's a tree or a pole. Or he sees a pole and a tree, thinks it's a man, he thinks it's a tree. In other words, darkness can deceive someone in one of two ways. It can deceive him into thinking that there is nothing there. He doesn't see what is there in any way. Or he can see something and be deceived into thinking it's something else. That's what darkness does to a person. And he says, "V'hatut hasheni hu kashe min harishon." The second mistake is worse than the first. Shehu mat'eh riyatam. It deceives the vision of people. Ad she ro'im hara ki'ilu hu mamash tov, v'atov ki'ilu hu ra. It's one thing not to know good and not to know evil. One doesn't know good, one doesn't know evil. So one can go ask. One is in a pitch black forest. What he usually does is he just stands until it gets light. But if one thinks that evil is good, or good is evil, he will go thinking that he has the truth, when in reality he does not have it. We live today in an age when not only do they make the first mistake, people are simply blind and simply do not know what truth is. But worse, far worse, in various different groups, there are efforts to persuade, and perhaps the people really think so, that choshech is or and or is choshech. Light is darkness and darkness is light. And tov ra and ra tov, and mal matok and matok mal, bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter. Until the authenticity of Judaism has become corrupted, not necessarily through evil people, but worse, through people that are well-meaning, and indeed people that consider themselves authentic Jews, and really, really do believe it, and are good people. And it's not their fault. And things have been handed down to them. This is the great, great tragedy. This is the great, great tragedy. The inability to see the whole authentic Jewish idea. And it's so similar to that classic story. You want to open it? Yeah. Just that he's not going to stand. of the three blind men and the elephant. Famous story. Three blind men heard that there is such a thing in the world known as an elephant. Interested to find out what is an elephant. So one came and he touched the tusk and he said, an elephant is a spear. One touched the tail and he said, an elephant is a rope. One touched the leg and he said, an elephant is a pillar. And of course an elephant is not a rope, it's not a pillar, it's not a spear. An elephant is an elephant. You have to see the elephant. You have to know an elephant to know what an elephant is. You have to know the authentic Jewish idea to know what the authentic Jewish idea is. Or else you will think it's a spear or an elephant. But the Jewish idea is not an elephant. It's the Jewish idea. Authentic. The reason and the major reason for the corruption and the counterfeiting of the authentic Jewish idea is the galut, the exile. And in future classes, Hashem, we will go into the question of why the Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted us in one country and not in the exile. But the fact that the Jew went into exile was the major reason for his, and not through any fault of his own, who was necessarily becoming corrupt. For various reasons. One, a people that is not in its own country can never be normal. Never, never, never. One had to live, anyone here had to live in a furnished room in someone else's apartment for his or her entire life. You could never be normal. You would always have to worry about when you come in and when you go out and how you dress and what you say and how you speak and what you say. Certainly. You can never be normal. And that is the reason why Jews in the Galut are not normal. And that's why Jews in this country are not normal, because they may have left the Galut, but the Galut did not leave them. And that is the great, great difference. So the Galut affected us, it twisted us, it corrupted our psyche, and even more, it affected our very thoughts, because we absorbed the non-Jewish culture of the Galut. It's not possible not to absorb it. When one lives within an environment, one must absorb a part of that environment. It's impossible not to. Impossible not to. The young Jew in America, who in the morning sits and learns Torah, in the afternoon he learns Thomas Jefferson, will eventually assume that Judaism and Thomas Jefferson are the same. It becomes natural to him. He is taught that Jefferson was a great, great gadol of a goy. So he learns to separate synagogue and state. He learns that Torah means eating kosher and keeping Shabbos and going to shul. And then there's politics. That's a separate thing. Then there's politics. Politics, Jefferson was a great, great man in politics. And he was probably right, because they taught him that in the Yeshiva. The Jewish idea never separates synagogue and state. The Jewish idea is the totality of Jewish life. The totality of Jewish life. If the Shulchan Aruch tells us what shoe to put on first, what shoe to put on second, what shoe to tie first, what shoe to tie second, it's not going to deal with what kind of government, what kind of state, and the relationship between Jews and non-Jews, and democracy and not democracy. Of course it does. But when you live for 1900 years without a state, you get used to it. So Judaism became a religion. Judaism was never a religion, ever. There isn't even a word in the entire Chumash you won't find the word dat. uses a religion. Even in the rest of the Tanakh, when it is used, it isn't used as a religion. Dat means a law. It doesn't mean a religion. Jews were never a religion. We were an Am Kadosh, a holy nation, a holy people. But we were a people, we were a nation. Different than other nations. That's true, because we were a holy nation. Am Kadosh, a holy nation. Am Zgula, special people. Am Nivchar, a chosen nation. That's true. But always a nation. And always a people tied to a state. And by the very fact, the mitziyut, the practicality of not living in our state, eventually after 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, you get used to it, not having a state. And you turn into a religion. And so, the purpose of this course is a very broad concept of the authentic Jewish ideal. And to say that it's a course which will cause controversy in many circles is to understate it. Is to understate it. But the truth is that we have to cry out against corruption, no matter whether it is done purposely or whether it is done in the most natural way and with the best of meaning and intentions. But corruption corrupts. Corruption corrupts. In Parshat Re'eh, Dvarim, we have a mitzvah of a Navi Sheker, a false prophet. A prophet who preaches in God's name falsely. And his punishment is a severe one. Severe punishment. He says, Hanavi Ahu, O Cholem Hachalom Ahu, that prophet or that dreamer, that visionary, Yumat shall die. Shall die. Why? Ki diber Sara al Hashem Elokechem. For he has spoken falsely. Usar min haderech. He has gone off the path. He has perverted. He has counterfeited the words of God. And the Or HaChaim, one of the great commentators, brings down from the Sifri, in the Midrash, the Sifri, the following things. Ki diber Sara, spoken falsely, sheba lezayef et dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He has come to forge or to counterfeit the words of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He counterfeits the words. He lies. He says this is truth and it is not truth. Or HaChaim adds, Ba'al ziyufo hu met. He dies because he counterfeited it. He died because he spoke in God's name things that were false. Ba'al ziyufo hu met. Because of his counterfeiting, he dies. Ad kedei chach. That is the punishment for a person who merely tried to get people to go in the wrong way. Why? To counterfeit the truth, to counterfeit the Jewish idea, is the worst of all sins and the worst of all tragedies. The worst of all tragedies. I want to, at this point, try and lay the foundation. The essence of the Jewish idea. And try to get you to understand what that essence is. By throwing out several questions to you. First of all, in a very, very famous essay, one of the leading thinkers and theologians of the Reformed Jewish movement. Jacob Petachowski, really one of the great thinkers, made the following statement, and think about it carefully. But it is not true that the Reformed Jew rejects the 613 commandments as a whole. If a Reformed Jew loves his neighbor, he is observing one of the commandments. If he refrains from murder or theft, he is observing a second and third commandment. Thus, neither the Orthodox nor the Reformed Jew can be described as either totally observing or totally rejecting the 613 commandments. Both are partial observers. That's his statement. Think about that for a second. And don't give me answers yet. Just think about that for a second. Is it true? Is it not true? If it's not true, why is it not true? Just hold it for a second. Second point. We find in the Mishnah, we have a Mishnah in Brachot, in very bit, in Mishnah Hey, the following statement. Lama kadma shma V'vaya im Shemua. You know that we say in the Kriyat Shema, there are 3 chapters. And they ask, why is, and these 3 chapters don't follow each other in the Chumash. One is Hanan, and one is Akev, and one is Chalal. Earlier, the third one is Chalal in the 4th book of Moses, and not the 5th book of Moses. So the Gemara there, the Mishnah there asks, why that order? Why did they put Shema before Vayayim Shemo? It says, Ela kedei sheyikabel alav ol malchut shamayim tchila, v'achar kach yikabel ol mitzvot. That he should first take upon himself the yoke of the commandments, and afterwards the commandments. What's the difference? The main thing is to do the commandments. It's a big deal. The yoke of the commandments. Do the commandments.
Malchut Shamayim.
Ol Malchut Shamayim Tchila. You have to take upon yourself the yoke of heaven, and afterwards the commandments. Why? The main thing is, I'll abide that every single Jew did the commandments. Well, what is the big deal about having Ol Malchut Shamayim first? So that's the second question. Think of all these questions, because in the end, every single one of these questions will have basically the same answer. Third question is, we have also in the Mishnah, in Brachot, Perek Hey, we have a very interesting thing. If someone is walking along the road, thinking to himself, a philosopher, a good Jew, he's thinking about Torah, and he says to himself, he's thinking about that interesting commandment that if one sees a nest and a bird is sitting on the eggs or on her fledglings, you shouldn't take the eggs while she's there. You have to send her away and then take the eggs. So if someone is walking along the path and he's thinking about this thing, and he says the following. He says, how wonderful is God's source. Al kansipo yagiu rachamecha. God's mercies extend even to a bird in a nest. What a nice God. He says, what a nice mitzvah. Nice mitzvah. Nice mitzvah. Mishakinoto. We silence him. We silence him. Why do we silence him? It is a nice mitzvah. It is a merciful thing. It's a very, very nice mitzvah. Any Jew would like that mitzvah. That's a nice mitzvah. And Chabad would like that. HaTorah would like that. And the Reform Rabbi would also like that. Anybody would like that. That's a nice mitzvah. You see a bird, and then, it's a pity. I mean, the bird feels terrible with the eggs, so you send it in and take the egg. What do you say? Next, we have the Gemara says in different places, but one of the places, Kedushin in Lamed Aleph, it says the following: Gadol mitzuvev oseh mi she'eino mitzuvev oseh. Greater is a Jew who is commanded to do a mitzvah and does it, greater than one who doesn't have to do it but volunteers and does it. Now, we all know, I was in the army here for 13 years. And a guy that's a mitnadev, a volunteer, true that he's called a flyer, that's a second problem. But let's assume, but after all, a person doesn't have to do something. He goes out and he says, I'll do it. He gets a medal if he comes back. So, how in the world? So why? Why in the world? Why in the world does the Gemara come and say that if someone has to do it and does it, he's greater than someone that doesn't have to, and yet he says, "I will do that." That question. Next question. We all know, all the Jews are always proud of the fact that the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai and they said, "Na'aseh v'nishma," we will do and we will listen. And they said first, we will do and then listen. We'll first do it. It doesn't want to say, we'll do it. We'll accept the Torah, and everybody say, we took the Torah and no one else wanted to do it, and we took it, and it's great. Great. But in the Gemara Shabbos, Daf Pechet, brings out a very, very, very strange thing. It says as follows: Melamed shekafai HaKadosh Baruch Hu alehem et hahal kegigim. But his Baruch Hu raised Mount Sinai above the Jews, held it over them. V'amar lehem, and he said to them, Im atem mikablim haTorah, if you will accept my Torah, mutav good. V'im lav, and if not, potehei ruachem. Here you die. Here you're going to be buried. And then the Jews said, "Na'aseh v'nishma." I must tell you something. Any salesman would want to have that as, what's the big deal now? Obviously, God had a pretty good incentive for the Jewish people. Anyone would have said, "I will do." Anyone would have said that. Why did he do it? The Jews were willing to do it, and we know that they were willing to do it even without this. So why did he do it? Why? What are the rabbis telling us? Another question. Shavuot is called Zman Matan Oratein, the time of the giving of the Torah. But that's not the real thing, the giving of the Torah. What good is it if someone gives it to me and I don't take it? It really should have been called Zman Abalat. Come in. Getting of the Torah. The main thing wasn't the giving. The main thing was that we got it and we took it. We accepted it. So why is the emphasis put Zman Matan Torah, the time of the giving of the Torah? I have a whole bunch of other questions here, but let's pause now, because I think that from these questions, you should be able to have the answer to all of them. It is the same answer to all of these questions. The same answer. No. Let's see who's smart. Who knows the authentic Jewish idea? Yeah.
You do the mitzvah not because it's nice, not because you feel good about it. You do it because that's what God tells you.
Exactly right. Kabbalat ol malchut shamayim. If you do a mitzvah because you agree with it, you are not doing a mitzvah. What does a mitzvah mean? It comes from the Hebrew word tzav, tzivui. You are commanded to do it. If you do it because you like it, then you're not doing it because it was commanded. You are doing it because you agree with it. not obeying God. If your name is Cohen, you're following Cohenism, not Judaism. And indeed, what happens if your keeping commandments are based upon the fact that you like them? What happens when you come across one, and believe me, there are one or two that you may not like, that happen to go against the modern Jewish grain? What do you do then? That one doesn't keep. Let me tell you, that's exactly the point. Someone sent me here a clipping from the Northern California Jewish Bulletin, July 21st, 1989, by a Rabbi Joseph Asher. Rabbi Joseph Asher is Rabbi Emeritus at Congregation Emmanuel in San Francisco. The heading is Pinchas. He speaks about, he was chosen that week to speak about the portion of the week. He spoke about Pinchas, and you will know what the story of Pinchas is. That Pinchas came and saw Jew and non-Jew relations, and openly, publicly, in defiance of Moses, and he killed them both, and was therefore honored by God as having saved the Jewish people. The heading here is Pinchas, on expunging liturgy to set correct tone for God. Now you know where he's coming from. And he starts off by saying the following: no matter how sacred the text of our scriptures is to us, occasionally we come across passages that are less than inspiring as examples of divine mandates, meaning that they don't raise the standards of the Israelites to acts of compassion superior to that of their contemporaries. And so he now goes into the Torah reading for this week's passage, for example, speaks of the incident of Pinchas, and he goes into passage after passage after passage, and he says, it is such passages which, at least in my view, spoil the mostly high tone of our holy writs and present an image of God out of sync with the attributes of the God of Israel that scriptures in most other instances seek to convey.
What kind of a rabbi was he? Or is he?
Let's keep this on a high level, right? Calling people names never shed anything except heat and not light. So he says, perhaps it is too much asked to alter or expurgate the sacred text. He says, however, that we can try and change it. He says we can de-emphasize certain portions of it that fail to project the concept of God articulated with such sophistication in later writings of our Bible. Now, if I had a full day, I could sit down and name 10,000 passages which he would find objectionable. That's what it was. The point is to set the correct tone. Who sets the correct tone? Who sets the correct tone? Asher isn't following Judaism. He has every right to differ with it, but then don't practice Judaism. Call it Asherism, or call it anything else that you want. But above all, take the Torah out of your temple, because it's riddled with passages that he differs with. Riddled with it. The sacrifices he differs with fully, totally. I mean, the concept of Jews and non-Jews he differs with. There is hardly a passage in certain chapters that he would not find out of sync with what he thinks is Judaism. Now, he knows it isn't Judaism. The reason why he doesn't get up in his pulpit and say, let's take out a Torah which speaks about wiping out these 7 nations. The reason why he doesn't say that is because it's hard to give up money. A good salary, a good position, and prestige. It's hard. So he doesn't. So instead he sits and he speaks about expunging the liturgy to set the correct tone that he enjoys. Ol Malchut Shamayim, the yoke of heaven, that is what it's about. And that's why, taking each question one by one, when Pedachowski says that when a Reformed Jew loves his neighbor, he is observing one of the commandments. When he doesn't steal, when he doesn't murder, he is observing another one, another one. It's not true. A Reformed Jew never observes one mitzvah in his entire life. Because that which he does observe, he is doing because he thinks it is a good thing. If a non-Jew refrains from murder, is he observing a mitzvah? Of course not. Of course not. He is doing the right thing, but not because it's a mitzvah. When a non-Jew honors his parents, and non-Jews honor their parents or don't honor their parents, just like Jews do, unfortunately. Not that he's doing mitzvah. And every single example that he brought down were examples that he agrees with. Not to steal and not to murder and so on. Certainly. He doesn't observe a single mitzvah because he doesn't accept the yoke of heaven. And that's why when the Mishnah says that if one says about the nest and the mother bird, what a nice mitzvah, and what mercy it is. Of course it's mercy. But be quiet, because that's not why you keep it. That's not why you keep it. It is merciful, true, but that's not why you keep it. Whether you think it's merciful or don't think it's merciful, you keep it, because if the only mitzvahs that you keep will be merciful ones, what will you do when you come across a mitzvah which is most unmerciful, like throwing out the apples? Then the same person gets up and he says, that's terrible, that's fascism. And that's in the same book which speaks about the bird and the mother. And the nest and the eggs. See, but that I don't like. I don't like that page. Ol Malchut Shamayim is the yoke of heaven. And that's why, before you say Shema, before you talk about the mitzvah, Vayayim, Shamoah, Tishmu, before you deal with that chapter dealing with the commandments, you first say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. He commands. Whatever He says, I do. Now I can go on to the mitzvah. Now I can go on to the mitzvah. Because I have said I accept God and whatever, because He is one and He is my God and whatever He says is true. Now I can do the mitzvah. If I don't say that first, I'll never do a single mitzvah. I'll only do those things which I think are good. And that's why one who is commanded to do a mitzvah and does it is greater than one who is not commanded and does it anyhow. Because if you were not commanded and you do it, you decided to do it. It wasn't a mitzvah. You decided to do it. That's a very, very nice thing. That's a very, very nice thing. But you didn't do a mitzvah. The person that does the mitzvah, he is the person that is great. Because he does it even though he may not want it. And indeed, the more grating the mitzvah, the more you don't like it, the more painful it is, the more you differ with it, and you still do it, the greater is the action that mitzvah has done to you as a person. But the whole purpose of the mitzvot, as we'll talk about, please God, in other lectures, the whole purpose is to take the me that is inside a person, the I, me, I, and to harness it, and to soften it, and to channel it. That's what the mitzvah is. I may not like it, but I'll do it because God said it. And if He said it, then it is true. And that's why the Almighty lifted the mountain. He knew that the Jews at that moment were ready to accept the Torah. Who wouldn't? They just saw 10 plagues, 10 tremendous miracles. They saw the splitting of the Red Sea. They were on a high. They were on a high. Of course they were ready to do whatever you do, fine. But what about 40 days later, 40 years later? Who knows? They'll forget, and so on. You don't accept Torah on emotion because you're on a high. Accept Torah through logic and through thinking and through saying, if God gave it by definition, it's true. It's true. That's why the rabbis have a tremendous concept. They say, Chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emet. God's seal is truth. Why is it true? Why not chesed? Mercy, pity, mishpat, justice, many kinds of attributes of God. Why did the rabbis say His seal, and they chose His seal is truth? Because if you don't have truth, your chesed won't be true either. And your tzedek won't be true either. And your mishpat won't be true either. And your rachamim won't be true either. All of your attributes won't be true. The first thing is admit that what He says is truth. Then your chesed will be the way He defines it, and not the way you want to define it. And your justice will be the way He defined it, and not the way you would like to define it. And that's why on Shavuot, the emphasis is not on the fact that we took it, but matan, that He gave it. We took it because He gave it. Not that we took it because, hey, that's a pretty good book. I like that book. He gave it, and we took it. What we received, the Kabbalah, the receipt, was only because of the Netinah, the giving. Are there any questions so far before we take a little break, and then we'll go on to the half hour? Yes.
Where does it explain that Hashem's Baruch said if you don't accept it? The opposite. I would say logically, if we accept it, and without question, without being forced, the emunah would be greater than knowing if I don't accept it, I'll be dead in a minute.
That's only if your acceptance was in the way that Abraham did. Abraham had nothing to see. He saw nothing. God didn't. When he had seen any manifestation of God's prowess and His greatness, nothing. It was a process of his thinking it through, in the face of being thrown into a furnace, and nevertheless he said, "I will choose God." Here, the Jews were coming off a great high, a tremendous miracle. They saw miracles. They weren't choosing it because of faith. If you had just seen the 10 plagues and the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea, you would have also done it. And any people would have done it. Anyone would have done it. There wasn't faith involved in this thing. There was an emotional high here. An emotional high. And God knew that. And He said, that's not the way to choose it. You are going to choose it as if every mitzvah that was over you, so that you were doing it because it is a mitzvah, not because you're now at this moment on an emotional high. That's the thing. Yes.
And again,
Because some of them seem to be difficult ones, some to be things which are not nice, not given our culture. But the Bible says, it is nice because I said it's nice.
My question is, this kind of act takes the bechira away,
Not
part of it.
that may be true. You are absolutely right. The Bechira was taken from the Jewish people from the very beginning. They were chosen already, whether they wanted to or they didn't want to. They were chosen because of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They indeed had free choice. They indeed. And they made it the hard way, through suffering, and they got nothing. They didn't get anything. Nothing but suffering. And when they chose it, their children became chosen. Whether they wanted to or not. A Jew now, he may have free will, but he's be punished for it. I mean, free will doesn't mean you have the right not to do a mitzvah. You have the opportunity not to do it. It doesn't mean the right. You have a choice. Either do it or don't do it. Know that if you don't do it, you're going to suffer. It isn't a question, well, I have a choice. No, it isn't a choice. You have the free will only in the sense that an animal doesn't, or that angels don't. That is the greatness of human beings. We are certainly greater than animals, but we're also greater than the angels. And an angel is programmed to be good. He can't be bad. He's programmed. He's like a computer. He has to be good. Can't be bad. So meadows, he doesn't get. And animals are programmed to be animals. They can't be blamed. But Jews, or human beings, have that free will. They have a choice. But they better choose properly what is punishment.
So that's no choice. So that's no choice. That is no choice then.
Not true. It isn't true. There is
If you're only
but there is a biological choice, and if you don't believe in this punishment, then you will do the bad thing and not care about it.
that's something different. You won't
That's
get
not
it back.
different at all. The only thing that free will means is that you are, in your biology, you are capable, unlike the animal or the angel, of doing what you want. But
According to the intelligence which the Lord God gave us,
actually, certainly.
so that our interpretation of the Lord God's scripture shall be according to man's intelligence too.
No, God.
Not directly.
God gave us a Torah. The very thing that you are quoting, this thing of free will, and you say that man has free will. How do you know that man has free will? It's in the Torah. The very same Torah, which says that there is free will, also says everything else. Now, if one doesn't, indeed, there are people that reject the Torah, and they reject the very concept of a free will concept. I mean, Calvinism, in great measure, doesn't accept that. It said that there is a predestined thing, because otherwise, if God knows what you're going to do, so why punish him? This was Calvin's question. It's Rambam's question earlier, a bit earlier, but Calvin, in the end, rejected the concept of free will. He said there is a predestination within every single person, and that's it. Yes.
I really want to ask you very important. You said, in the things you said so far, you said, like throwing out the arrows. You said, because it's important for me to clarify in my mind.
Yes.
There's two references that I know of in the Chumash.
No, wait. Many lessons on the Jewish idea, and I'm not going to go into that now. There was no point. I just mentioned it just in passing, and we have now passed it. If you keep on coming to this class, there will be one full course, one full class on that issue, with all the sources and all the facts and everything else, and we'll deal with that. Right now, let's stick to the issue itself. 2 minutes, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back. Yes.
I see that Hashem was very merciful to us by giving us that warning, because He's always merciful. And why? Because He wants us as partners, and because He understands us and our weaknesses, and He already knew what the Jewish people would do, so that the idea of free will to go and destroy yourself or do anything biological to yourself or anything spiritual against yourself. We have the free will to do it, but then we also have to pay the consequences. And in his mercy, he has to tell us that. He has to warn us that there are consequences to the free will that we choose. And in giving the Torah, whether, yes, the people were on a high, but he knew that that the people had the option of abusing and violating him. He just wanted to make, that's how I would see it, that he wanted to make sure that the people understood and had the warning.
Well, I can see questions in that too, but I don't want to get into that now either, because that's not the actual subject matter of the course of this lesson. Yes.
You were talking about, suppose the Torah contradicts the feelings of somebody, and therefore he must readjust his feelings with the Torah. So, but this gentleman reminded me of something else. Suppose the Torah contradicts my intelligence. I got a problem. Now, let me just indicate. I was once studying with a young rabbi. We were studying together. I told him a story of something I had done, and he was horrified. He says, "You violated the Torah." Then he came back to me a few days later. He says, "That's okay. Forget it." But during that interim, he was telling me that the Torah violated my intelligence, and I was not going to throw out I couldn't adjust to it. I was not going to throw out my intelligence.
Well, first of all, I don't know the
I'll tell you another time. I'll tell you the incident. I don't want to go into it now.
But when when people use a term or label my intelligence or my emotions, I'm not necessarily sure that term is being used correctly. So it's hard for me to deal with it on that. But just in general terms, I think it's an important issue which you raised. My intelligence, or your intelligence, or anyone's, is really a very, very relative thing. There's no question that as we get older and more experienced, or study or listen to things which seem to us to be very, very logical, very, very clear, and intelligent, really aren't. So therefore, I think it's not necessarily true that because it's your an intelligence that therefore I'll stick to it. Nevertheless, one should never abdicate thinking. Don't abdicate your thought processes. But what you should do, and this is a difficult thing, it's not an easy thing. You should always question. With the concept that he may know more about Judaism, and therefore I will bow to him, but I'm still not happy with it. I'll keep questioning, and I may find another rabbi. You're not married to your rabbi. Know that. Everybody has to have a posek, someone who is his rabbi. Everybody.
But we don't want to accept it blindly.
But you're not married to the rabbi. And if his concepts simply go against you, find another rabbi. But never go off on your own. And give him the benefit of the doubt for a while. Because he may be right. He probably is right. But if you see that he isn't right in your thinking, find another rabbi. But don't abdicate your mind.
That's the point.
Never
That's what I couldn't do.
Don't just simply say, but he said it. Yes, what's the source? Where does it say? Always, the first question is, what's the source? Always ask that. And you'll be amazed at how suddenly it's not quite clear to him. On the other hand, he may say, not only one source, here are 12 sources. At that point, you better back away. In other words, not arrogance and not ego, But on the other hand, don't abdicate your mind. Don't become a robot. Don't become an automaton. Ask questions. If Rashi asks questions on the Talmud, you can ask questions to your rabbi. Just politely and being humble, because you have to start off with the premise he knows more and a lot more. And then he has to fall into his own trap. In other words, he has to rebut the premise. The premise is that he knows more, but he can rebut it. Many do. One more question, and then we'll take a break of 5 minutes, and then finish in a half hour.
I'd like to ask another question.
Yes.
Yes. I'm Bar Chula, and I came into a classic conflict problem, which many Bar Chula do. I just wonder if you give me an answer.
Yes.
You see, you say you have to accept this as the Word of God. And I got to the stage, I was convinced the Chumash is the Word of God. I was even convinced the Mishnah transmitted orally down may be the Word of God. But then I started to look at Gemara and to learn Gemara properly. And it just seems to me like a set of arguments, like in the regular secular court. Different people arguing different, and then we decide the majority decision. I can even accept that, but then you come to rabbinic gezeras and decrees, which have got no basis whatsoever. They just suddenly came to a point of street, we're going to impose certain laws. And I find it hard to say, like you said, the business of tying shoes. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol put his blood in the hand here, and so and we tie his foot on the left. So when we come to tie the shoes, we tie on the left shoe. And you get bogged down in this detail. This isn't the Word of God already. This is just men inventing various systems of things, and various chumrot and various ideas, and building on it and building it. As you said before, it's a religion that was in the Galut, and so it's all they had was the religion. So it became more and more developed and more evolved. And you come to a situation where you actually start backtracking and sliding. And from where the first part you accepted the great ideas in the Chumash as the Word of God, you start to get to a position where you're not so sure anymore. I just wonder if you could put me straight on something.
I will. Let's take a break, and we'll get right back to your thing, because it's an important question, and I don't want to give it just a minute. I want to give it the proper time. Okay? In that question there, to make it quite clear, when the Torah was given, it was given Bichtav and Bal Peh, written and oral. And that's a fundamental basic belief of Judaism. And on that, Judaism stands or falls. If the oral law is not oral, then you have to be happy with people getting stoned to their death without witnesses, without warnings, and without all the various things that the oral law modifies, in quotes. Now, the oral law itself gives the power to the leaders of the generations to make changes and make the rules. The Shamuat Mishmalti, it's a pasuk, and they shall observe my observances. And the study is Asu Mishmeret Mishmalti. Make a guardrail for my guardianship. And in short, we are told that sometimes you have to make a fence around certain things. And the rabbis were given that power. How do we say the commandment? On Chanukah, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, and commanded us to have Chanukah. You don't have Chanukah, the rabbi says, right? It says that the commandment was given, that the rabbis had the power to do this. The rabbis had the power to originate a decree. And that's it. Lo tasu mimenu yamin usmol. The rabbis said, thou shalt not move right or left from what they say. Otherwise, the Torah would be carved in stone. It can never change. The Torah has to be a living thing. The rabbis have to have the power to when you come and you ask a question, whether one can ride an automobile on Shabbat, if the rabbis didn't have the power to interpret the law and to find a source for it in modern times, we'd end up like the Amish
This is exactly what the Conservatives
in
say.
Pennsylvania.
And the Reform because
Not
they say
true.
so.
They don't accept the Torah as being from Sinai, and they don't accept the Talmud as being from Sinai. That's for sure. That's for sure. What we say is, of course, it comes from Sinai, and the rabbis of each time, those people, those scholars, have the power to find a source in there which is applicable for our times. In short, if you find a source which is applicable, the question of, let's say, energy, which comes from fire, then you have a source. You know, a source. Certainly this is so, but you have to accept the sources as being from God. Otherwise, why have Judaism, period?
I want you to know some specific points. I
Yes.
just want to pursue you on this because
Yes.
I'm trying to pin you down.
Yeah.
Happened to me about a few weeks before I made mine out, which was only a couple of months ago. And I went to a series of lectures supposed to be given
Yes.
in Manchester, which is my hometown in England. And Diane Dunner, who was Diane of the London Beth Din, came along. He was supposed to speak. There was a mixed audience.
Yes.
Like, half you got women like this, and half the men. There was no kids. So I think
Yeah.
he walked in, he mumbled something in English, said, "There's no way, this is our soul, there's no way I can speak to this crowd of people."
Yeah.
So then there was a whole uproar, and they had to get the local Rosh Yeshiva in, and he said, "Oh no, you can, there's nothing wrong." And there was such an argument, and eventually the whole thing collapsed. And the problem is, you find, you obviously got no problem talking to a mixed audience, and you don't see anything wrong with halakha and doing that. But this guy, who's
But that's-
presumably steeped in halakha, and his whole life is spent giving psak, he's saying, no, you can't do it.
But
Well, why is
rabbis differ. But rabbis differ because rabbis are human beings, and the Torah was not given to angels; it was given to human beings. And of course, there are differences, but each rabbi has to have his source for it.
But
And of course, we will differ on it. Of course,
to
we
me,
differ.
it seems like an ever-increasing process of getting stricter and stricter and stricter.
It
For example, you go to,
depends.
I'd say in other places in Manchester,
It
if I went in
depends.
like this, they'd call me not because I don't have two hats on.
Well, I would.
But
That's not true.
they
That's-
would. I
no.
know for a fact that they do.
No, but that is not true. That is not true, and let's not get carried away. They may not be happy with that, knitted yarmulke, but they come to call you that because without
It's
two
happened,
hats.
it's happened to me.
Well, so the fact is that I never call that, okay, and I don't wear. And I wear one knitted too. It's also black knitted, but that's different. I wear a black knitted one to show you see.
But don't you accept?
You wear a black hat and also knitted.
Don't you accept there comes a point
No,
where these people they get carried away and they take upon strictnesses which really.
Well, that's
it's
what
not
you
the Torah.
say. No, that's what you say. So find a rabbi that doesn't do that. But that was always so throughout the ages. It's a very, very natural thing. It's a normal thing. We don't have God coming down to us every single day at Mount Sinai. And only children want it. But I want to be absolutely sure on every single thing. Children want to be absolutely certain. Life is not an absolute certainty. Lahavdil. In law too, in constitutional law, there are judges who will look at the same law. And one will read into it this and one that. The main thing is that he accepts that law as his source and as a divine source. If you don't accept it as a divine source, then who needs the law? And who needs the rabbi? And who needs Judaism? Do your thing. But if you do follow it, if you believe this is the source, it's a very, very, very natural thing for people, again, on the basis of their environment. Each of us, I don't care who the rabbi is, the greatest rabbi is a product of environment. So he sees it this way, and the other one sees it that way. But both of them, and as the Talmud put it, Elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God as they see it. The main thing that we have to ask of them is honesty, and they're both honest. And believe that this is a divine source, and I see it as I see it. If you feel that I see nothing wrong in a mixed class, I know, but I have sources for that. Others say no, it isn't good because it could lead. So I say it could lead. Let's hope it won't. No one will tell you, no rabbi will tell you that it isn't allowed because what he'll say is it isn't good. And there's something to it. And certain times you have to take that risk. In other words, if there was a law which says it isn't allowed, you say, that's it, too bad, that's it. But there are rabbis who say it's not worth it. There's a risk, it's not worth it. And I say it's very, very worth it because unfortunately the things that are being said must be heard by everybody. Yes.
Along the same lines,
Yes.
okay, so we got the Torah and the oral tradition at Mount Sinai.
Yes.
Now, we guard that text, yet no distinction's been made, as far as I know, between the oral tradition as it was given at Mount Sinai and the embellishments that were made over time.
Of course, everybody knows. Anyone who studies Talmud knows that in the Talmud it says clearly when it was created by the rabbis and when not. A gzera, it says it's a gzera. The Raita, the Rabbanan, whether it's a Shvut, everything is clearly indicated. Clearly so.
For instance.
Clearly so. You started learning now in Yeshiva. And you've been learning now for how long?
Okay,
Very, very short.
for instance,
Wait a while.
a married woman covering her hair.
Yes,
I read the part that the suspected adulteress and they uncovered her hair.
But that's not the point. Really, a little learning not only can be dangerous, it can be fatal.
That's the way you're going to answer my question?
That's right, because that's not the thing. Because you haven't studied properly. And before you start studying Torah, walk in being humble. If you're not being humble, Moses' greatness was because he was humble. He talked to God for 4 days and 40 nights.
I'm not on his level.
And he walked out, that's right, and he stayed humble. And you're walking in right, I saw really with all due respect, I don't know what your major was in college, but I'm sure that you know that a lot better than I do. You're going into something new. Before you start saying, I read the part, that's not the part at all. It has nothing to do with the adulterers. That's absurd. It's in the Gemara, it's King Subas, which you haven't read, studied. One doesn't read Torah, one studies Torah, one studies it. And then you'll see what it's about. But don't come in right after that and say, I saw it. Ask the question. Don't make the statement.
I'm asking the question.
So, I'm telling you that.
So how do we get from uncovering the suspected adulteress's hair
You don't get it from that.
to
It
a married woman?
It has nothing.
So where's
to do
the
with
source for married woman covering her hair?
that. Subas.
So what is it?
That's a woman that a married woman's hair has to be covered because it attracts men.
But I mean, what's the source for it?
It's in the Talmud. That is a source for it. That is a source for it. That is the oral law. That is the source for it. What do you?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to know.
I think she went to chapter.
Maybe she wants to.
I really want to know.
Something in the Chumash.
Okay, fine. Okay. Afterwards, I'll show you. I'll take down the word.
And I want to know if it's what came from Mount Sinai or if it's
The
embellished.
Talmud came from Mount Sinai. Okay. All those areas which in which it does not say clearly that this was made by the rabbis themselves. There are many, 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 many laws in which it specifically states it's Zera, it's Rabbanon, it's for the rabbis, and they were given that right. And they were given that right. They were given that right. And if not, then I don't know why you light candles.
So who has the right to reverse it today?
What?
Who has the right to reverse it today? We don't.
No one has a right
I mean,
to
it seems like we're
reverse it.
frozen in time because we
Frozen
don't.
in time. I mean, why are you frozen? I mean, I don't feel frozen.
But
I feel extremely.
Oh, that's not fair, Rabbi. That's not fair to the young lady.
nothing can
You know,
change now.
appreciating your sense of humor.
You certainly. No, it isn't. It isn't the sense of humor. What do you mean? What do you
You seem to
frozen?
you said you don't feel frozen.
That's exactly right.
What she means is it immutable?
That's exactly, yes.
Yes.
It's immutable.
Well, is it?
And that's not frozen. And that's
But it
not
is
frozen, sir. That's not frozen.
Well,
That's
what's the difference?
immutable.
What's the difference?
The difference is the connotation of frozen. Frozen means it's frozen. It isn't a good thing. I can't change it. An immutable thing is God's word is immutable. And when he passes it down to the rabbis, it's immutable. It's not frozen. It's immutable.
But it's man's word that we're discussing, whether that's
It is
immutable.
man's word.
Rabbinical decision, whether that's immutable.
It's the rabbinical's decision which was given in the Torah. Thou shalt not move from it right or left. The authority of the rabbis was an authority given in the Torah.
But now we
Otherwise,
don't have anybody to. We don't have leaders of our time. We don't have a Sanhedrin. We are frozen. We don't have
and if we
anybody
had a
with the halakha.
Sanhedrin, you wouldn't be, as you say, frozen?
Well,
Yes, you'd be frozen too. Let's not. The rabbis of our time, the exact power, the leaders of our time, and it says specifically, and you should go up to the leaders who shall be in that time.
name one. Who's the leaders of our time right now?
Your particular rabbi is your leader. Your leader.
If he's Orthodox.
Well, naturally. He is your leader. And if you don't like him, there are great many other leaders. But you are not a leader yet. Perhaps with God's help, sit and learn.
I found Orthodox rabbis say that pants are okay so long as they're made for women.
And what?
That pants.
If
slacks-
your rabbi said that to you, then fine. If your rabbi said that to you, then fine.
Well, somebody said it to me. I'm trying to find the rabbi that said it.
Above all, there must be honesty. There must be honesty. And honesty means if you accept it, you accept it. If not, why be Jewish at all? And that's the bottom line. Most people stay Jewish because they haven't got the courage to say, why be Jewish, period. So they hang on to whatever vestiges they have. And they talk about being proud of being Jewish, which is probably one of the great racist concepts of all time. What are you proud of being Jewish for if being Jewish is not special? What's so special about being Jewish? Unless there's Judaism. Not one thing special about Jewish nationalism. Not one thing. There are proud nationalists in Serbia, in Armenia, and even some in Israel.
But
That's
get
not
in.
that is there is not one bit special about being a Jew. It is absurd to be a Jew just because some goy is an anti-Semite and makes you one. I'm not a Jew because some Gentile said you had better be a Jew or else I'm going to kill you. The fact of the matter is that being Jewish has logic only if it has something that no one else has. And that's Judaism. And if Judaism doesn't come from Sinai, then throw it out and stop playing games with it. Stop lighting candles on Shabbos on Friday night, which is a rabbinical law. Yes.
Rabbi, in this generation, when there's no Sanhedrin,
Yes.
and there are two rabbis, both who believe in halakha, and they would not differ from the confines of halakha. For example, in the issue that came up about land for peace.
There are 85 issues in which rabbis differ. So
What guidance does a layman get from rabbis of this generation? when
you
they
have
disagree?
it is not your concern what this great rabbi said or that great rabbi said. You have your rabbi. Otherwise, there is anarchy. There is anarchy. You're an attorney, and you know that there are courts. And courts differ.
There's a final court.
Well, first of all, there is a final court if it agrees to, rule on it. But if the high court doesn't rule on it, if in Washington the 9 judges suddenly say, well, we don't want to rule on this, then you're stuck with a circuit court ruling from Maryland, which may differ tremendously from that in Wyoming or in New York, and so on. Obviously, that's why it's a living law. It's a living law. Otherwise, it's going to be petrified and really frozen. It's a living law because rabbis who are competent, do this for 2 reasons. One, they accept the divinity of Torah, written and oral, and secondly, because they're scholars. So they rule on it. And you have your rabbi. And that's the one who gives you guidance. If after a couple of months or years you don't like this man's guidance, you find another rabbi. Move to some other district or jurisdiction, meaning change shuls, whatever.
But if you shop enough, then you'll find the answer you want.
Not necessarily true. There isn't one Orthodox rabbi that will give you, certain answers. I mean, but secondly, one doesn't shop. Once you've asked the question and you've gotten the answer, that's the answer. Now, you may not be happy with the answer and with his general trend, so therefore, for the future, you're going to switch. You're going to find someone else. But once you've
Not on the
asked,
same issue, though.
that's accepted. What?
Not on the same issue. That's the
Of course not. No. Of course not. Once
you get the
you've asked on that,
you cannot go to another.
otherwise it becomes a joke. A joke.
I did have
That's
a
what to
question.
deal with today. Yes, I promise you. Yes. And I keep my word. Yes.
That's what you do indeed. 2 things.
Yes.
Dear Rabbi, when you... Yes.
Anyone that starts so,
Well-
dear Rabbi, I get
Well,
it.
I used to stand and applaud you outside the Hamash when you didn't have a political party, going back many years, because you were a man of courage and vision, and I applauded you and admired you. Right. Okay, having said that, in my introductory part, let me say, when you say to me that there are 85 different opinions, that on some of these issues, they can be of tremendous political importance, right? I hear one great famous rabbi who shall be nameless who says, land for peace.
Right.
Absolutely right. According to the Halakha, and his counterpart in the other camp says, land for peace, absolutely disgraceful. It's not in the Halakha at all. So who do I go to? Do I support Rabbi Kahane, or do I support Peace Now? I mean, that's the practical application of it. So that's one difficulty I'm going to have with the fact that this lady raised. We don't have a Sanhedrin, we don't have a rabbinical authority that speaks with one voice or with any semblance of authority, and at great times, Rabbi, excluding yourself with any sense of responsibility. Now, the question I would like to put to you directly is this. If, came the hero of Psalm, you achieved political power within the next 6 months and formed a cabinet, would you reinstitute the awful massacres, the daily massacres, in honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they did in ancient times on the Temple Mount? Because I feel that would fill me with fear and foreboding and absolute loathing, whether it's from Mediarizer or not. And you better sit down and find some Pesach din on it to excuse me from witnessing it.
That's I think a much more honest. You say whether it's Araisa. The whole purpose of this lesson was exactly this. Whether you think it's terrible, if you don't think it's terrible, that's the halacha. You'll be saved from it only because if there's no temple, then there's no sacrifices. But if you were to pose the question to me, if there was any temple, of course there's a certain. To me, the question of what is right and what is wrong and what is horrid or obscene, it's not for you to say, not for me to say. In terms of Judaism, this is what God says. And certainly that area, there isn't a single rabbi that won't admit that in the Chumash it speaks about the sacrifices.
But Isaiah takes a strong view about it.
I don't know about that. I think that's what all he says is that it's a hypocrisy to bring the sacrifice while you're also stealing. But he's not against the sacrifices. Indeed, in many places he speaks of it that will come again. That the major issue here is you're placing your sense of what is right and what is wrong against that Torah, and that's a legitimate thing if you place it in that way. And the whole purpose of this lesson of the Jewish idea is precisely that, knowing that there were so many Jews who, for various reasons, think that this isn't right, this isn't nice, and so on. That's exactly right. Well, we'll see in a moment when I finish up. I want to bring in something which was right to the heart of what you said. Just one minor point first. I think that when you came and you mentioned the question of land for peace, and you said that he says the high and the other verse, it isn't in the halacha. I venture to say that you didn't read any of what they actually wrote. It was in the post, the Jerusalem Post, and not Jerusalem Post. Of course, always quotes properly. I've seen the Piskei Din, Rabbi Yosef, and the others. All of them base their findings, the opposite finding, on the same concept. Ask the generals. They all say it's like Yom Kippur. If someone says, I don't feel well, I have to eat, you don't ask a rabbi, you ask a doctor. They say, ask general. So one says the generals will never all say to give up land, therefore one cannot give up land. The others say you don't have to have them all saying it. If the majority says it, then you have to give up land to save a life. And both of them are wrong. Both sides are wrong. Of course, the question of asking generals doesn't play any part in this at all. The question of giving land is not similar to that of Yom Kippur or Shabbos, saying we'll devote one whole course, one whole class to the question of giving up land. They're both wrong. One is not allowed to give up land for a very, very different reason. It is the only mitzvah of all the mitzvot in which one is commanded to go to war and risk life, because it is a mechemet mitzvah, a war of
obligation.
One's obliged to. One doesn't ask generals on that for various reasons, as we will see. I just want to finish one point, and that is in the Dvarim, in Pashat Eikev, at the very, very end. The Gemara said, the Chumash says, it goes on the following thing. Halechet b'chol drachav u'dafkavo, to go in all of his ways and to cleave unto God, to cleave unto him. U'dafkavo, to cleave unto him, cleave. Like devik. Devik means glue, right? Devik. Dafkavo. The Ibn Ezra, one of the commentators in the Bible, says on these words, u'dafkavo, to cleave unto him. Who Sod Gadol is a great secret. And he leaves it at that. He leaves it at that without an explanation why it's a great secret. Who sold Gadol is a great secret. Says the Yechonim hem divrei Rav. The words of the Rav Ibn Ezra are correct. Ki sod Hashem lire'av hadbukim b'midotav. The secret of God is given to those who fear Him and who cleave onto His midot, His attributes. Uvadvekut atzmo yesod atzum. In the very act of cleaving onto God and doing that which He commands. Yesod atzum. There in itself is a tremendous secret. Shelo lachlif avodat ish ve'echad. One should not confuse the attributes and exchange one for the other. One should not do an attribute at this point when he should be doing the opposite. For example, le'choz be'rachmanut b'makom tzarich kas. To be merciful when God calls at that moment for anger. In other words, God has attributes, all kinds of attributes. Mercy, but also anger. And God tells us when we should be merciful and when we should not be. And the secret of cleaving to God is cleaving to His attributes. When He says, now don't be merciful. Now is the time to be angry. Be angry. And when He says, now is the time to be merciful, even if you want to be angry, be merciful. Oshelo lachzik be'anava. Don't cleave to modesty. Be humble. At a time when one has to garb himself in vengeance. God is humble. He's anav. But He's also one who has nikama, vengeance. There's a time, and one has to know when, in the proper time. And here is what He says. Umuatim heim b'nei ha'aliyah. Few are the men of greatness. Asher yochazu b'midot al derech emet. Who cleave onto those attributes properly, in truth. They koshel bam, and don't stumble over them. Heima hagdolim asher ba'aretz. They are the great ones in the land. The ones who bury their desire and their wills and their tendencies to that of God. If He says, this is the commandment, at this point, don't have mercy upon these people, don't have mercy on the enemy, then know that it is God who made mercy, it is God who made it, and He defines mercy, and not we. Judaism has mitzvot, commandments, and also has concepts. And the mitzvah, the commandment, is merely the outer manifestation of the inner concept. And if your concept is all messed up, what are you doing when you perform the ritual? You are merely emphasizing the wrong concept. So you first have to know the concept as given by God. It isn't just, Shabbos, of course, that's in the Shulchan Aruch. But concepts that I can make up. It's not true. And that's why one can never be the perfect Jew without being a scholarly Jew. Sitting and studying and studying and studying. Jews don't want people to be ignorant. Torah does not look kindly on the ignoramus. Torah looks kindly upon the one that studies and learns and asks questions and grows and grows and grows. Know the concepts, and then the mitzvot, the rituals, will grow as the outer manifestation of those concepts. First, know those concepts. That's why the yeshiva here was called the yeshiva of the Jewish idea. And that's what makes this one a very, very different yeshiva. Is we teach them the ideas. Not just, we teach them forests and not just trees. The mitzvot of trees. Of course you have to follow every single one, including tying your shoes the right way. But you have to know where the mitzvah fits in. What concept is this thing teaching me? You have to be a thinker. No Jew should sit as some robot and not ask. Be a thinker. Question as a humble person, knowing I'm asking a question. I'm not making a statement. I don't know, and I have to first learn. I have to study. And if the answer is not a satisfactory one to you, ask it again, and ask it again, and ask it again. And if you're still not happy, find a different rabbi and ask him again. But always know that you're asking a question, because you don't have the answer, and that there is the answer, and that eventually you will get the answer. Okay, any other questions? And before that, if not, we'll finish. Okay. This is not good. So all the evening classes, including those which unfortunately won't be as crowded as this one, will be held from now on in the museum on Osishkin Street, and in which there is more room. Okay? Any questions? No?
And I'd like to say something. Please don't hesitate to call me from 12 to 6 if you want to